The Business of Biotech is produced by Life Science Connect and its community of learning, solving, and sourcing resources for biopharma decision makers. If you're working on biologics process development and manufacturing challenges, you need to swing by bioprocessonline.com. If you're trying to stay ahead of the cell or gene therapy curve, visit cellandgene.com. When it's time to map out your clinical course, let clinicalleader.com help. And if optimizing outsourcing decisions is what you're after, check out outsourcepharma.com. We're Life Science Connect, and we're here to help. If you've been listening to the Business of Biotech for a while now, you may have picked up on the fact that I love a good story about driven young pharmaceutical sales reps who climb the ladder from carrying the bag and street-level business development all the way up to the C-Suite. Episodes 112 with Aviato Bio's Lisa Deschamps and 167 with Orca Bio's Dan Kirby come to mind as examples. I am Matt Pillar. This is the Business of Biotech, and today we're talking with a guy who did just that in fantastic fashion, climbing the majority of his ladder with Amgen before taking the reins at Daiichi Sankyo, where he's been for the past 10 years and where he's been central to the company's embrace of and leadership in oncology and the antibody-drug conjugate arena. His name is Ken Keller. He's chairman of the board, president, and CEO at Daiichi Sankyo Incorporated, global head of the Daiichi Sankyo oncology business, and he's here with me today. Ken, welcome to the show.
Matt, thank you very much for having me here.
I'm thrilled to have you here, and I do love these stories. Young folks like coming out of academia who have an interest in biotech and biopharma often ask me. They often ask me, like, it happens more than you can imagine. Like, what should I do next? Should I go get my MBA? Should I go to work in industry? What role should I seek? And my response is usually like, all of it. Like, start somewhere and embrace as much of it as you possibly can. And stories like yours, they sort of embody that, right? They illustrate that. You started, at the base level, right? Carrying the bag, like I said, and just embraced everything as you moved up the ladder at Amgen. And that's where I want to start. I want to kind of do a little bit of a retrospective on Ken Keller's career trajectory, if you will. And I mean, when I look at CVs, I always hesitate to put an age on people. You look great. You look like a young man. I mean, it's terrific, but
thank you.
But we do need to rewind the clock quite a bit to go back to, those days where you earned your business undergrad at St. John's, a bit later an MBA at Loyola Marymount. So if you roll the clock back to those days, what was your career intention then coming out of that undergrad and MBA experience?
Yeah, great question. So I haven't been called young in a long time. So I like where you started.
Well, I specifically did not say the specific years that you graduated from those programs.
Well, it's hard for me to say this, but I graduated college from St. John's 40 years ago this year.
Yeah. Well, congrats.
It just doesn't seem, it seems like yesterday, quite honestly. I wish I could give you a more profound answer than what I'm going to say, but what you said is just absolutely perfect, and it kind of encapsulates kind of my career start. When I graduated St. John's, I had an undergraduate degree in business finance, and my dad was an accountant. And I remember my dad telling me, Ken, the salespeople understand how we make money. They bring business into our company. That's a great place to start. And, I think if you're in the finance world, you probably have a little bit of the sales world envy. I think my dad had that. But because of his coaching, the only aspiration I had after college was I wanted to get into a company and start in sales so I could really learn the business from the bottom up. In terms of why I chose pharmaceuticals, I had 2 job offers back then. One was entry-level sales position at a company called ADP, and it was selling tax and basically payroll services. Then I had another offer from a company called Beecham Pharmaceuticals, which went on to become SmithKline Beecham and then Glaxo.
Yeah.
Why did I choose pharmaceuticals? I knew no one in the industry. I didn't even know that pharmaceutical sales existed. What made me choose that job was at that time I was driving around my family's old station wagon that had wood on the side.
Nice.
And Beecham Pharmaceuticals gave me a company car.
Oh,
And
so there was the cool factor, right?
when they said I get a car, I was all in. And that was the depth of my thinking of pharmaceuticals. And it was one of the luckiest decisions of my life. And I'm a big believer, luck is important, making the right choices, obviously, but sometimes you get lucky. And that really was a decision that shaped my entire life.
Yeah, yeah, for sure. Did you did you right off the bat embrace sort of the life sciences role? I mean, was that foreign territory, like completely foreign territory for you? I mean, coming out of college with a finance degree like ADP, hey, if you had landed there, very successful company, could have gone a lot of places there too. And I imagine the nomenclature of that space might have been a little bit more familiar to you at the time.
Absolutely. I think two things. One is I worked for a person. His name is Tom Gebbia. Tom, if you see this, I haven't spoke to you in 35 years, but thank you. I mean, that gentleman took me under his wing. He was the district manager. And, he took me and I knew nothing about pharmaceuticals, chemistry, the drug business, reimbursement. And that gentleman taught me so much. So, I stumbled into the right mentor. Super important.
Mm-hmm.
Second thing, though, is you very quickly learn that when you're bringing new medicines to, whether it be oncologists or primary care doctors, there is something incredibly special about doing that. And what I found is back then, we were selling 3 different medicines, amoxicillin, an antibiotic, Augmentin, and a drug called Timentin, which was an IV antibiotic. And I met my wife through Timentin, literally. She was a nurse. I was working at, back then it was NYU, Bellevue, and the VA in Manhattan. And I was promoting Timentin to basically the oncologist at this university. My wife was a nurse. And I met her there. Actually, a friend of hers, the chief resident and fellow there, introduced us basically. And he didn't know my name. He didn't know Ken Keller. He knew me as the Timentin man. That was the drug that I was promoting.
Yeah.
So he introduced this nurse to Timentin man. And, that's how we kind of met. But there was something that I just gravitated to, when you bring a new medicine, something that you can see the excitement in the doctor's eyes when they say, okay, this is a new tool for me to help my patients. There's a feeling there that I would have never gotten from ADP. And I didn't know that when I took the job. It was the car. But to me, once you're doing something like that, you just never want to change. You always want to be bringing something new, something that changes the standard of care, something that excites the medical community. That's an amazing feeling.
Yeah. 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 It was the car and eventually the wife. Talk about perks, right? Talk about making the right decision. Who knows who you might have met at ADP, but I'm surely not as interesting as a nurse. I mean,
you got it.
That's fantastic. So at some point in those early days, you transitioned into Amgen, and Amgen is where you stayed for quite some time and really exercised your ladder climbing chops, if you will. Tell us a bit about your time there.
So I joined Amgen as the first sales training class as they were building out their commercial division. And I still have friends from that class. In that class, we've got people like Dave Halal, who went on to become the CEO of Alexion, and now he's a chairman of the board of a number of different companies. What was amazing about that time, I started at Amgen in my 20s, and I left when I was 50. And so I grew up at Amgen. What made it so unique is it was one of the first biotechnology companies, and it was a company that literally had zero revenue when I joined. And any advice that I would give people, if you can join a company that is entering a period of growth, that's going to give you so many more opportunities. And so when I joined, I started as a sales rep. I graduated to my destination job, a district manager. I remember saying to my wife, if I can become a district manager, we've made it.
Yeah.
And I became a district manager. And then I had a unique experience. I was offered an opportunity to go inside for a rotation, a 3-month rotation in marketing. And I did that because the company said, look, we want you to get some inside experience before you become a regional manager. I went inside and I met people. I started to work with clinical development. The idea of shaping a product and being kind of the architect behind what this product or medicine would look like, that was the place I was meant to be. It was an addicting, in a positive way, experience.
Yeah.
And so after 3 months, I had a goal. I had an ambition. I had a destination. I wanted to get into marketing and grow my career there. Amgen gave me the opportunity to be a sales rep, and then I joined marketing full time. Moved my family from the East Coast to the West Coast. The moment they landed, we were like, this is where we want to be.
Yeah.
It was beautiful. It was sunny, but
so says the guy who's now speaking to me from New Jersey.
I know. Life goes in a full circle, doesn't it? One thing that was really important, though, and I think it defined who I was at Amgen from my entire career and even who I am today. When I joined the marketing team at Amgen as an associate product manager, that team was filled with brilliant people, senior pharmaceutical executives, people that were in a different league than me, at least in my mind and heart at the time. They were from amazing schools. And I was the marketing guy who actually knew customers. That's who I was. It was like, hey, we've got this young marketing guy. He actually knows customers. He's actually carried the bag. And that defined me and made me different within this group of amazingly talented people. And throughout my career, I've always used that as a badge of honor. And there's a little bit of a secret sauce in this, which is, from there, in any therapeutic area that I worked in or any drug, you look at all the market research in the world, but the secret for me has been developing a connection and a relationship with a handful of key opinion leaders and customers, whether it be for Enbrel with rheumatoid arthritis or running the bone health business unit, dealing with KOLs from osteoporosis, or in oncology, which is what I love. I have a group of customers that now I can pick up the phone right now. I can text them right now, and they will get back to me immediately. And that's always been the secret of staying connected to what is really happening.
Yeah.
Because you can get lost inside. You hire a lot of consultants to help you. You do a lot of market research, but always vet that and pressure test that versus a few people that you really, really trust.
Yeah.
And, that's been my kind of secret element, along the way.
Yeah. Well, you're like the personality and sort of the personal relationships that you established. Did they it's sort of a 2-part question. One, did that instill the confidence in you at that young age in an industry where you're surrounded by, to your point, some pretty heady people, MDs and PhDs, right? Research scientists. Did that establish personally for you the confidence that you needed to not be completely out of your depth with those folks, one, and two, at what point, can you recall at what point you sort of realized, embrace that confidence versus, you can you can try to swim out of your depth in this space believe me, I do it all the time. I'm not a scientist, right? I love talking to people who are way smarter than me and teach me and our audience things. But I often feel out of my depth. So at what point did you sort of like come to this realization that, hey, I've got a strength here. I'm going to embrace it. And that's going to give me the confidence that I need to move forward.
Yeah, I remember the moment exactly. I was a product manager, maybe a marketing manager at this time, and we were working on a drug called Neupogen, an amazing drug, a granulocyte colony stimulating factor that actually would stimulate the bone marrow to produce white blood cells, and it would protect patients going through chemotherapy from getting infections. So a first-in-class amazing drug, and I was one of the people on the team. And this drug had gone from zero to about $1 billion at Amgen, and it was stagnant. And in fact, the company at that time thought, we had peaked. This is what the drug's going to be. I had an insight, and it was something that came to me from going out with customers, listening to them. And then one day, and I'll try to tell this really shortly, but I was looking at why there were some oncologists who were using Neupogen 5, 6, 7 times more than other oncologists, basically in the same practice with the same number of patients. And, no market research could tell us why. We'd ask the question, no one could articulate it. But then one day I was at the West Clinic, which is a major oncology clinic in Tennessee. And I was speaking to a gentleman, Dr. Lee Schwartzberg. And Lee is one of my confidants today. And, I just finally said, look, I don't understand. You're using this drug so much more than your peers. Help me understand it. We went to the charts, or he went to the charts, and we found that he was thinking about the drug in a slightly different way. This drug would increase white blood cells to prevent infection. But for him, it wasn't about a drug that would prevent infection. It was a drug that would allow him to deliver the optimal, the right dose of chemotherapy without having to dose reduce it and delay it, right? And so think about this. You're treating women with breast cancer. And the clinical data clearly shows if you can deliver that full dose of chemotherapy and not have to reduce it because of side effects, usually lower white blood cells, you can give that woman a higher cure rate. So all of a sudden, the insight was, well, let's not talk about this drug just to prevent infection. Let's talk about this drug as something that enables you to deliver the optimal chemotherapy, to give that woman the best chance of survival. And that was really our insight, Lee's and mine. And then we went back and we looked at how people were dosing chemotherapy across the globe, right? And sure enough, we saw some doctors that would just religiously do not lower the dose. We have to keep that dose at this level to give the woman the best chance for cure. And others just weren't doing that. And so we brought that back. We created an entire campaign around that, and revenue grew over 100% in 18 months. Now, to answer your question, all of a sudden, I was not just the junior marketer with a sales background.
Not just moving product, you were influencing.
I became the guy that came up with this insight. And, with that came a lot more attention from management. But with that came a completely different level of confidence. That was when I'm like, I can do this. I deserve to be sitting at this table with other people. And that's also what spurred me to go back to school at night, part-time, to get my MBA after I'd been out of college for 10 years. Because I wanted to then do more. And so, that one spark just changed a lot.
And I don't want to give short shrift to that long period of time that you spent at Amgen, but for lack of having hours and hours to talk, I'm going to fast forward to the two, I guess, most recent roles that you had there before moving on. And that's going to lead into a question. You were VP and general manager of the inflammation and bone health divisions there most recently, but your time at Amgen gave you a lot of that exposure I was talking about earlier to different modalities, to different targets, to different indications. Tell me a little bit about how, one, how you made that happen, right? Like how you made that happen, that exposure to so many different arenas within pharma and biopharma, and two, how those exposures shaped your I guess your preparation to become the leader that you are today of a major global biopharmaceutical company.
Yeah, great question. The pivotal opportunity I was given in my career was actually one job before becoming the vice president and head of bone health and inflammation. I was given the opportunity to move to England and be the country manager for Amgen in the UK and Ireland. Mm-hmm. And there you run everything about the organization. I was given that opportunity because I was not given a job that I wanted, right? So I was the head of marketing for oncology at Amgen. The head of global oncology came open. I wanted the job. Yeah. I went for the job, and I didn't get the job. Mm-hmm. And the CEO at the time, Kevin Shera, called me into his office, and I thought he was going to give me the job that day. I did. Yeah. And he said, Ken, I know you think you're going to get this job, but I'm not going to give you this job. And of course, I was deflated. I said, well, Kevin, why? I've done this, 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 and this. And he asked me one question. He said, Ken, can you name the number of stars in this organization that you created? And the truth is, I was all about the marketing guy at that time. It was all about the brand plans, driving revenue. I was not about developing people. Mm-hmm. And so Kevin said, I'm going to give you a different job. I'm going to give you a job that you will fail unless you really embrace and understand that a leader's job is to help others be successful. Mm-hmm. And so, boom, I was placed in the UK, different products that Amgen had at the time, different healthcare system, different people, and I could not do that job unless I honestly focused on people.
Yeah, people. And when you say focus on people, I mean, to this point in your career, you reference like your focus on external people, relationships with customers and decision makers outside in the market. Nailed that, right? Nailed that. Hit that square in the 10 ring. But now you're talking about internal development of leadership and thought.
Exactly. And the truth is, that was not in my toolkit at the time, right? Mm-hmm. I framed success about coming up with the best business plan, the best marketing campaign, and driving revenue. And that's important, right? That's our job. You got to do that. But as you go up in the organization, it really becomes your job is not just that, but it's helping people to be their very best. So I went to England, did 3.5 years there. Then the job came open to run the inflammation and bone health business unit. And it was at a time where that drug and that business was struggling. So they needed a different lens and a different look at this. And so I went back and I took that job with I came back a different person. I came back as someone that genuinely, I looked at my job as creating the environment and the culture within that group so that people could be their very best, where people could have fun in their job. The group was a little demoralized at the time. They were a little beaten up, giving them new hope, inspiring them, changing people so they're in the right positions. And that opportunity allowed me to put kind of the new Ken Keller into play. And really things started happening from there. Yeah.
Yeah, that's pretty fascinating. So, that was a perfect answer to the 2-part question, because, the second part of that question was like how those exposures prepared you. And it sounds like coming out of those experiences, developing internal folks and creating stars, using your words, did that sort of inspire the confidence that it took to say, okay, like when it's time to leave Amgen, I think I'm ready to be the top dog.
Yeah, it did. And because more than anything else, being in different therapeutic areas. So by the time I left Amgen, I had run the inflammation and bone health business unit. I led the oncology business unit. I led a country in Europe that had other areas like nephrology. And, I learned that what you need to do in any therapeutic area, you can learn the science. Everyone can learn the science or enough to be able to do your job. But what you have to do is have your own way of building the organization, bringing people along, helping people and the company grow. If you have that, you can go anywhere. And that is what gave me the confidence to jump to Daiichi Sankyo.
Yeah. When you made that leap, that's been about 10 years since when you made that leap, you moved directly into the CEO role at Daiichi Sankyo?
No, I went into the first job was the head of business for the United States.
Okay.
And then about 5 years ago, I took over the CEO chairman job.
Yeah. Yeah. All right. So I want to shift gears here, sort of transition into, that 5 and 10 year period, the 10-year period since you've been with Daiichi Sankyo, and the transformation that you've sort of shepherded there. The company's evolved considerably, I think, during your tenure. The move into oncology and more recently the ADC space has been under your watch. So tell me a little bit about that. I guess just frame it up. We'll get into the details, but frame it up like what you walked into and what led to, like, what sort of inspired you to start crafting and manipulating to move into a different sort of area.
When I joined Daiichi Sankyo, it was literally 100-year-old Japanese pharmaceutical company with an incredibly successful background in cardiovascular disease, based on drugs like olmesartan, which is one of the first ARBs on the market, drugs like Effient, which is an antiplatelet. So very, very strong foundation in cardiovascular disease, a place I'd never worked.
Yeah.
What really excited me about joining the organization was their intent to develop the next growth pillar for the company, which is oncology. And there is, I've had the opportunity, joining Amgen early, especially, but then, working in different business units. There's something different about building an organization than joining something that's already built and you're just running it.
Right.
And so the appeal was to build an oncology organization on the foundation of the cardiovascular strength. And when I joined, Daiichi Sankyo had no oncology products. We had a few in the pipeline, and that was the intent as expressed by the CEO, George Nakayama, at the time. What we have done over the last 10 years is our scientists developed this antibody-drug conjugate technology. And it's really simply the concept of making chemotherapy smart to act like a heat-seeking missile to the cancer cells. That concept's been around for decades. The first ADC was launched in 2000. Between 2000 and 2015, most ADCs had failed. As a category, people had lost enthusiasm.
Yeah.
But our scientists in Tokyo, they developed a new technology, a DXd technology, and that just opened up the door for a platform technology that we believed could yield 4, 5, 6, 7 different new medicines. And so the promise of that is what gave the entire organization the courage to say, we're going to do this and we're going to go all in on it. Yeah.
Yeah. So before we get into some specifics around that ADC program, just generally, I think this will resonate with a lot of listeners who have worked in organizations where there's maybe a public or even internal conceptual embrace of some monumental change. But then when it's time to build the foundation of that monumental change, you encounter some maybe friction, some roadblocks, some challenges. when you're doing this, and to your point, 120 plus year old Japanese company that's rooted, I mean, grounded, right? Strong culture. There are surely going to be challenges, right? Like, I mean, there are surely going to be challenges where, yeah, we want to do this, but there are going to be buts, but, hey, let's pull back on the reins there a little bit, tell me a little bit about that. Like what, fundamentally, beyond, without getting into, we'll talk specifically about the ADC program, but like, what did it take, or what does it take to say, listen, like, we're going to do this, we're going to see this through. And when you face challenges, how do you deal with them? Like potential roadblocks or cultural, I guess, kind of stops. How do you work through that?
To transform a company around a technology that is different and new, tons of skepticism. As I said before, ADCs were looked at as yesterday's news. Here's what made it possible. The C-Suite, and I'm talking about the executive management committee. There's like 5 people.
Mm-hmm.
Those 5 people united together, and their conviction made it happen. You can never transform an organization unless you get that support from the very, very top.
Yeah.
And that, because it goes across the board of the company. The commercial part of it, quite frankly, is the tail of the dog. When you're talking about changing a company, complete company, you're talking about getting the manufacturing organization to invest hundreds of millions of dollars before you know if you really have a product.
Yeah.
That's just, think about that. That's like incredible. You got your development organization, your regulatory organization. Everyone is making investments years before the drug will ever launch without a sure thing, right? And so you've got to get that conviction from the top. So that's the first part of it. Then what you have to, the people at the top, they have to frame for everyone in the organization what is in play and what's not, right? Because as you can imagine, groups would come and say, well, we need to invest $50 million to develop this manufacturing line.
Mm-hmm.
You can't do that if anyone thinks that this is a halfway bet.
Yeah.
And so the CEO, the chief operating officer, and myself, we made it very, very clear that this is going to be the future of the company. And, we wanted everyone to prepare and, bet their jobs on this.
Yeah.
Now, the question that people might have is, how would you have the courage to do that? I mean, you're literally betting the company on transforming it. And for us, everything changed when we presented the phase 1 data.
Mm-hmm.
These ADCs looked great curing mice.
Yeah.
Cured a lot of mice in my time, right? The phase 1 data, though, and this is what makes oncology so incredible. This is 120 patients, metastatic breast cancer, who had failed 4, 5, 6 lines of therapy. So unfortunately, these people are in really dire straits.
Yeah.
They really lost all hope. In those patients, our drug demonstrated a 60% response rate. 60% after all of that. And we saw that internally, and we thought we had something special. But literally, the CEO, the COO, other members of the EMC, we went together to where the data was presented, and we saw the reaction, and we gathered the thought leaders, and they looked the thought leaders in their eyes and said, what do you think of this?
Yeah.
That was almost back to the very beginning, being connected to the customers. When we saw we saw their eyes, and they told us, what you have here is transformative. And I actually think that single meeting, it was at a meeting called ASCO, and that room where there was maybe 10 investigators, mm-hmm. and the 5 of us, that gave the leaders of this company the conviction to, in essence, bet the company.
Yeah. Yeah, that's a super unique, I'm sure an exciting, I mean, super interesting experience for a company, as I said, that's been around for a long, long time, very well established. You know, it's almost like an injection, like a major injection of that biotech startup kind of feel, like, hey, we're onto something here. Probably doesn't happen as often as you might think in companies like Daiichi Sankyo. Um, the platform, the ADC platform that you mentioned, you know, because the other thing at face value, at surface value, you look at that time, and to your point, like the industry was still kind of stinging from the hope and then kind of
Fade, yeah.
fall, right? Like the fall of ADCs, the fall of their promise. So that platform, I mean, the company must have known that it was onto something that was going to sort of revitalize this ADC space. Otherwise, like it'd be even, it's a scary enough proposition to say, hey, we're going to make this monumental shift. Even scarier when you're doing so on the heels of industrial scale failure, for lack of a better word, of the modality.
Yeah. So the way this came about was there's a gentleman in our research labs in Shinagawa, Tokyo. It's Dr. Akatsuma. And him and his team, they worked quietly for a decade on this ADC technology.
Mm-hmm.
And so while others kind of gave up because, you know, from the first launch, there was only 2 other ADCs that had launched in 20 years.
Yeah.
And they weren't very successful. But, you know, what they did is they took this old technology and they revamped it and they made it new. You know, the technical part of it is they created a new payload. And very quickly, what an ADC simply is it's an antibody-drug conjugate that is linked to a payload, a payload like a chemotherapy agent. And so rather than the chemotherapy working everywhere, the antibody-drug conjugate takes it right to the cancer cell to exert its cytotoxicity. But what they did is they created a new payload, a payload that would diffuse outside of the cancer cell so that it could exert its cytotoxicity in the tumor microenvironment. They created an ADC that had an 8-to-1 antibody to drug ratio and a new linker technology. So the entire ADC was new.
Mm-hmm.
And so it was engineered specifically to do a few things. We saw the results preclinically, and then we saw the results clinically. And the words that we used here at the company is, we are going to create the world's oldest biotech startup. That's literally the words we used. I mean, we were going to start a 120-year-old biotech startup.
Yeah.
And, you know, our bosses gave us the freedom to dream that big and to protect us, because you could never build a oncology division to work with the speed you need. And I'll give you a great example. In cardiovascular disease, which was what we did, typically development is 1 or 2 clinical studies, thousands of patients. That's cardiovascular disease. In oncology, today we're running over 70 trials. Trials can range from 50 patients to maybe 500 patients, not thousands.
Mm-hmm.
In cardiovascular disease, that study, our last big drug, that study took 7 years.
Yeah.
In oncology, studies take a year, months. And so the speed, the amount of changes that you have to do, the mindset you need in oncology, completely different than cardiovascular disease.
Yeah.
So unless you really are able to protect that group, to be nimble, be flexible, be quick, you can never do it. And we purposely carved this oncology business outside from Daiichi Sankyo.
Yeah.
And it really has made a huge difference.
Yeah. Yeah. Just real quick question on the technology. You know, when I look at the ADC space, I mean, today it's a thriving development space, lots of players, and I'll get your opinions on that in a little bit. But when you look at those players, many different business models. So many players who are just they're outsourcing the antibody, they're outsourcing the linker technology, or they're outsourcing the payload. Maybe maybe they're outsourcing all of it and putting it together on a platform. Maybe they're developing one element of those three internally and outsourcing others. I mean, there's very many permutations. Is the work going on there holistic in that you're creating your own antibodies, your own linker technology, and your own payloads?
So ours is a very all the linker technology, right, and the engineering part of it we own. We did it ourselves in our labs. In terms of the commercial scale manufacturing, we use many different contract manufacturing organizations. So we've got people making the antibodies for us. We do the conjugation ourselves. So it really is, it's such a complex manufacturing process that in order to do it, you do rely on outside manufacturing organizations. We do quite a bit. But the science, the engineering is all Daiichi Sankyo.
Yeah. So that science and engineering is obviously foundational, fundamental. It's happening in Japan. You've got something. We're going to move on it now. To your point, there's this monumental shift in the team, the rest of the team, right? All the folks who are supporting it clinically, supporting the clinical trials, who are, perhaps, are already working on some pre-commercialization efforts and on and on and on. So that requires some shift too, whether it's like taking the tools and people and resources that you have and manipulating them into this new arena, or bringing on new talent and resources. Tell me a little bit about that organizationally. What sort of HR and structural changes did the company need to make to accommodate the focus?
You just nailed it. And you asked me earlier, what were some of the challenges? Building the team and bringing in the oncology talent early was the biggest challenge. Because as you can imagine, who's Daiichi Sankyo in oncology?
Right.
No one in oncology knew Daiichi Sankyo. And so early on, it was difficult to attract the right kind of people. Now that's changed completely, right? As people have seen the success of this ADC platform, they've seen what our first drug in HER2 has done. The great thing about oncology is that people love and they flock to the next great big thing. I mean, people in oncology, we live, what really rolls our socks up and down is to bring that next great drug to the oncology community. So once people saw the success, wow, all of a sudden, everyone wants to be here. That was not the case early on. And so, at first, we brought in a handful of very talented people, but more so, we wanted to recruit people that had the mindset to be a builder, right? And that's not a small difference. There are some people that have joined Daiichi Sankyo from very large companies who have everything in place. They've been working in oncology for 30 years, and they found it difficult to be able to do their jobs without everything in place. And so we were really thoughtful of bringing people in who believed in what we were doing, but also had that builder mindset, right? That could build as they were running. So that's super important. And the other part of it is great people attract great people. And so early on, we were hiring for technical capabilities, but even more so, we were hiring people that we believed could bring other people with them. And for the most part, we got that right. And then success leads to more success. But that was a huge part of it.
Yeah. Give us a sense for the scale of that oncology effort now in terms of people and resources.
So I was employee number one in the oncology business unit. Today, we've got over 2,000 people working in oncology globally in over 55 countries. And like my direct reports, I've got people in Munich, I've got people in Tokyo, I've got people on the West Coast of the United States. We really are across the globe. I will say one really interesting thing. We did a lot of our hiring and building during COVID. And I will tell you, COVID made us better. And And here's why. And when you think about it, it won't be a surprise, but I'd grown up with this idea of, your staff, your people need to be here in Basking Ridge, New Jersey. They need to be where the home office is, right?
Yeah.
With COVID, I didn't have that luxury. And so because of that, I opened up my horizons and I hired people across the globe, and I was able to get better talent.
Yeah.
Better talent. And, I wish I had learned that years ago. And so that was one of those unintended, really blessings. And there's no blessings of COVID, but that opened up my eyes, and it actually helped us grow faster to be an oncology leader.
Yeah. Yeah, for sure. You mentioned the criticality of the support of the C-suite when you're taking on a monumental pivot. Get it? Had it? I got that. But when you look around sort of at the landscape of players, stakeholders, shareholders, people who you need to influence, who else kind of falls on that list? Like what and who else did you need to influence to make sure that, that everyone was paddling in the same direction and kind of lay the foundation for success?
So, the 3 or 4 people and groups that are been my partners in this the entire time, and the people that you need aboard. First, you've got to have a chief financial officer who believes in the mission and is willing to make early investments, and feel the pain in the P&L.
Mm-hmm.
When you're building an oncology division from scratch, there's a lot of investment and there's a lot of red early.
Yeah.
If the CFO doesn't believe in that, it's not going to happen, right? Second thing is your HR person, your HR leader, and we have a chief people officer here at Daiichi Sankyo, Simon King. They've got to, in essence, be your right-hand person, because they're the ones that are trying to help you attract the right people and the right talent. And you're going to have to build a team before the work can happen. So if you have finance and HR aboard, you're really on your way. That's super, super critical. Mm-hmm. But then there's a third piece of it, which I think I underappreciated early on. And that is, when we started in oncology, we had another business, a specialty business unit, the cardiovascular business. Mm-hmm. And at a time when I'm saying, I need more people, I need more resources, I'm competing with the resources from the cardiovascular division. Yeah. And at first, I really didn't invest enough time to help them understand what the potential was, what the future is, why they should be okay with me taking away some of their resources. And that seems like a minor thing, but it's something that I could have done better with, because if you don't have that in the same place, you'll end up with a lot of friction.
Yeah. Well, and I can imagine, I mean, in a situation like that, like, it's one thing if you're a small biotech and you're reallocating resources from perhaps a product that is not reading out the way that you had anticipated, destined for failure, or the indication has some better whatever it might be, like that's one thing. But when you're talking about Daiichi Sankyo cardiovascular business, I mean, incredible market as it is, foundational product. I mean, I can imagine those challenges when, were not trivial.
No, they really weren't. And, today I think we're in a great place, which is we've got, 2 highly successful pillars of business. And, now people can see the benefits of the investments we made. We've gone from 0 to basically our run rate right now is over $3 billion a year in oncology. And so now people get it. But, I guess my learning, if I ever get an opportunity to do something like this again, really invest the time in the people that have the legacy and have built the organization. And for us, it was a cardiovascular group. Make them understand that this is going to make us all stronger.
Yeah. All right. I want to shift gears for another minute. I want to ask you sort of a philosophical question. And I'm probably going to paraphrase this, but I've read that you've said, I'm going to read this. When you have that spark of innovation and that opportunity that you believe in, be beholden to that opportunity, not the status quo. I'm with you up to that point. You then say, if that new opportunity doesn't fit who you are, you've got to change who you are. That's the philosophical point I wanna press you on a little bit. You know, there's a I don't know if it's a prevailing mentality, but you know, there's this idea like stay true to who you are, right? Like be who you are and find where you fit. And this quote that I just read sounds a little bit contrarian to that. It sounds a little bit contrarian, like, hey, if the spark of innovation and change that you want to make happen requires you to change you, change you.
Yeah. Yeah. Great question. So for me, in the business of biotech pharmaceutical, what drives the company, the lifeblood of everything we do is scientific innovation. It's that new product, that new medicine that can change the world, change the standard of care, transform breast cancer like we've done with HER2. That's what we live for. And, you know, the idea, that's what is so rare. That great medicine is the unicorn. And so to me, when you have that, that's what you need to follow. That's what you need to be beholden to. There's many talented commercial people in the world, right? I'm telling you, commercial people can build a commercial model to fit a great medicine. That is a lot easier to do than to find that great medicine. You know, we've seen it time and time again. You know, Merck, who is now our partner for 3 of our ADCs, Merck, an unbelievable company in oncology today, right? Built on a single product, Keytruda.
Yeah.
15 years ago, Merck was not thought of as an oncology company, right? And you've seen this time and time again. I mean, you know, look at the obesity drugs today.
Yeah.
None of that existed, you know, 10 years ago. So I really do think the right way to do this is you follow the science, right? Where that leads you, then you adjust the rest of your organization, because that is what's so rare. And, you know, and when I say that, you know, don't change who you are. To me, that's more about the values of the organization, right? Who you are, whether it's in cardiovascular disease or oncology, you know, the fabric of the organization, what are the behaviors that really are important to you? Those things don't change.
Yeah.
But follow the science. And when you've got something, you know, change everything to bring that to patients.
Yeah. Yeah. All right, good. So, you know, I'm going to ask you another challenging question, perhaps challenging. Change management, especially as it relates to HR, is not always sunshine and roses, no matter how great the idea or grand the gesture or, you know, true the intention. You know, there are always going to be, especially in a large organization, folks who you just, you know, it's like the difference between a horse and a mule. The horse wants to please, and the mule wants to lock its feet up and not be pulled, right? Like, so what of those folks? Like, what's your philosophy on, like, you know, they may bring great value to the organization in some capacity, but they're not willing to embrace a major pivotal, you know, kind of change like that.
Yeah, I mean, you know, we've had those experiences too. I've had those experiences. I think my approach has always been, you know, start with the mindset that, you know, everybody wants to do a good job, because I really believe that's true. Everybody wants to do a good job. And so as a leader, your responsibility is to help people see what the future could be, to articulate clearly, definitively, you know, here's what we need from this group or what we need from you. Here are the expectations. So many times I've seen in my career where kind of people don't come aboard or they kind of go sideways. And the truth is, whoever that leader was, they didn't articulate what the expectations are. I always tell people, you know, year-end reviews, it's an open book test. I'm giving you the answers along the way. Right? And so many people, you know, they get their review at the end of the year and like, I'm surprised. You know, I thought I was doing great. And so the leader, when you change things, needs to be very, very clear on what the expectations are, not only for the business results, but also for the behaviors.
Mm-hmm.
And what I've seen is when people resist change, especially as here in Daiichi Sankyo, a lot of it is sometimes the business doesn't fit who they are as a person. I talked about speed and flexibility and nimbleness.
Yeah.
You have to have that. You have to be willing to operate at the 80% level in terms of, do I know this answer or not? Right?
Mm-hmm.
You've got to make those bets. Some people just can't do that. And, unfortunately, teams will only grow as fast and as healthy as each member of the team. And so if you do have people that are recalcitrant, they just can't get aboard, they're just, kind of locked in the past, you've got to move on, right,
Yeah.
from those people. And in my career, I think I've gotten better at it. But I do believe that the answer to that is up front. It's an open book test. Guys, here's where we're headed. Here's what I need from you. And
Yeah.
really having that dialogue. And so that's really important. But you cannot carry people. You just can't. And you always try to find the right thing for the person, and help them along their way.
Yeah. Well, one of the things to be excited about, if you're any of those people at every level of your team, is what I mentioned earlier, and the fact that Daiichi Sankyo's work in the ADC space sort of ushered in, or even happened in advance of this explosion that we've seen now. Like I said, I mean, it's just an incredible development arena is just insane right now. So that's got to be motivating in and of itself. Like, hey, we're in a hot arena right now. So tell me about your perception of that arena. Like when you look at the landscape again, even, some of these new and emerging companies, the much smaller companies that are working on ADC development right now. I mean, it's got to be pretty mind blowing.
The success that Daiichi Sankyo has had, it has absolutely ignited this incredible enthusiasm for ADCs. When we look at when we started working on our ADCs in the about 2012, 2010, very few companies were doing research. As I mentioned, it was passé news. It was yesterday's science.
Mm-hmm.
In the last 18 months, there's been over $80 billion of M&A in the ADC space.
Mm-hmm.
With Pfizer and Saddle Genetics and others. There are now hundreds of ADC programs there. So our success has ignited this incredible growth. I do see a future where wherever chemotherapy is used today, it is highly likely in 10 years that will be displaced by antibody-drug conjugates, right?
Yeah.
So I still believe we're only at the very, very beginning of what ADCs will look like in the future. The great news for patients is, the more companies working on this technology, I mean, science is beautiful. It just gets better and better and better. That's great for everybody. We've got to stay ahead of it. And we're working on a lot of different new technologies in ADCs. But here's where we are today. So we've got one antibody-drug conjugate on the market in HER2. In just 4 years, it has 5 indications. It has not just replaced old ADCs, it's transformed how you treat cancer with indications like a HER2 low indication, which allows us to help 60% of all the women with breast cancer out there in a category that had almost no treatments before.
Yeah.
Right? We just last week got a tumor agnostic indication, meaning this drug can be used for HER2 positive disease across the spectrum of cancer. We've got 2 other ADCs that have been filed with the FDA. One that we expect to be approved this summer, one at the end of the year. And we've got 7 antibody-drug conjugates, all based on this platform technology in the clinic today, and all demonstrating impressive ability to shrink tumors. So, we've got a lot coming, but the beautiful thing is there are dozens of other ADCs that are also close to being approved. And I just think that's what makes oncology unreal in terms of excitement. New drugs all the time, new standards of care, better for patients. And, that's what makes it great.
Yeah. Well, that you just answered the next question I was going to ask. I was going to ask you, you ignited the transformation industry wide. Daiichi Sankyo did. But that's, in this business, that's not enough. You don't do that and then rest on your laurels. So I was going to ask you, what are you doing to differentiate from that crowded field now? But I think you just answered it. I mean, the potential to have so many candidates in development, and the potential to be looking at as many approved products as there have been in the past, 20 years, in short order.
One of the things we are doing to add to my previous statement is oncology is all about speed of development, because as you said, people are developing new drugs all the time. And so unlike cardiovascular disease where studies take forever, how fast you do a study and how many studies you can do, that dictates your competitive success. And so one of the things that we've done is in our first 5 antibody-drug conjugates, we formed 2 partnerships, one with AstraZeneca for our first 2 ADCs, and then another partnership with Merck for ADC 3, 4, and 5. Now, why did we do that? The reason we did that is because we believe so much in the potential of this technology that we decided if we kept these drugs to ourselves, we would only be able to bring this drug to a certain number of patients because we couldn't do all the studies fast enough.
Yeah.
Right? And so we decided to partner with, quite frankly, the 2 most successful oncology companies the last decade, Merck and AstraZeneca. So they're our partners today. And with them, we're able to do 3 or 4 times more clinical studies and obtain, hopefully, 3 or 4 times more indications and help 3 to 4 times more patients than we could ourselves. And, that's what competition not forces you to do, but if you want to stay ahead of the competition, being bold, being fast, getting those studies done, bringing them to patients, that's what it's all about.
Yeah. That's a fascinating story. I've been abusive of your time. I feel like, if you didn't have other things to get to, and you've got a lot to get to, I could talk to you for the rest of the morning. But we'll conclude with this. What's next for Ken Keller? A vacation, maybe a little break, take the wife to someplace nice and warm.
I just took my wife, my 3 adult kids, my son-in-law, and my 3 grandkids. We just spent a week in Japan last week. So that vacation exhausted me. So I'm glad I'm back at work.
Yeah, no, I know that feeling. I've not traveled with quite that tribe, but I know what you're saying about coming back from vacation and looking forward to get back to the routine. So yeah. What is next for you though, in terms of your leadership there? I mean, you've given us a good outlay of what's next for the company, corporate wise. What's next for you?
Yeah, I love what I'm doing right now. And the way I see this playing out, in just a few years, Daiichi Sankyo is going to be one of the biggest oncology companies in the world. Today, Daiichi Sankyo ranks 15 in terms of global revenue in oncology. In just a few years, we'll be top 10.
Yeah.
By 2030, we should have 6 or 7 ADCs on the market in over 30 indications across a dozen different tumor types. So I'm proud of where we are, but I got to tell you, I've been in the job 10 years. I still feel like it's just a start. And, as long as I have that feeling, I hope I get to stay in my seat I'm in. Yeah.
Yeah. Well, I hope so too. You're doing great work and you're fantastic to talk to. I've enjoyed every minute of the conversation, Ken.
Thank you so much for this opportunity.
Oh, thanks for joining me. So that's Daiichi Sankyo's CEO, Ken Keller. I'm Matt Pillar, and this is the Business of Biotech. We're produced by Life Science Connect and available to hear anywhere you listen to podcasts and available to watch at bioprocessonline.com under the Listen and Watch tab. Subscribe to our newsletter at bioprocessonline.com/BOB. And in the meantime, thanks for listening.